Call this meeting of the Tourism Access Tax Coordination Committee together. First item of business would to approve the minutes of the May 25th meeting. Somebody want to make that a motion? Supervisor Merlino, second by Supervisor Wild. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Okay, the agenda items. First item is in your packet is a special event funding scoring sheet. And what I'd like to do today is we'll take any questions from the committee members or the public. And we're not going to adopt it today, but we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. So does any of the committee members have questions about the special event funding scoring sheet? Kristen and Joanne will try to answer those questions. So who has questions? Come on, Claudia, don't let me down.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Supervisor Bramer.
Okay, I'm just pulling it up on my computer because I don't see it in,
Okay.
we don't have it printed. That's fine. Just give me 1 second. It's not on the website either, so I just need 1 second. Pull up our email.
Where are the packets, Kevin?
This is it. They're here. That's all.
They were emailed out to everybody, I think, a long time ago, but the packets are over there. I don't know what's in them.
Okay.
I think
Supervisor
those are
Garrity.
the cover page report.
It's in your email.
I sent it.
Oh, we don't have any first, yeah, we don't have any copies?
I have a few.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
You have the
Okay.
floor.
I just had a comment from earlier when I had asked about adding an additional maybe line or two in the scoring. So say after 39 points to add an additional, to flush that out a little bit more, to maybe say 40 to 45 is 30,000, and then 45 to 50 is 35,000, and then over 50 is up to 50,000.
Hey, how's the committee feel about that?
I'm
Anybody
okay with
have a concern about that?
With that.
Is that a workable item for everybody? I can't hear.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Could we please ask the previous speaker to review what she just said? Because I just pulled up the scoring sheet myself.
Okay. Go ahead.
Sure,
Supervisor.
sure. So where it says in the scoring, 35 to 39 points, up to 24,000, that seems fine. And then 40 to 45 points, say up to 30,000, 45 to 50, 35,000, and then over 50 points, you would get up to 50,000. Just to add, just to flush that out. So it's really actually only adding one more category. The 45 to 50 would be up to 50, up to 35,000. It just seemed like when we were going through the scoring, it was very tight there, and to have another additional category would help flush out who is really deserving of the up to 50,000 amount.
Any discussion on that? Committee members? Chairwoman, go ahead.
I was hoping that we'd hear today from Kristen a little bit more about the event calculator as it relates to the scoring sheet and what Supervisor Bramer brought up. I thought there was a lot of dialogue at the last meeting regarding a consistent way to score events that would take into account both sales tax, op tax, the heads and beds, a multiple level rubric. And I know that there's positives and negatives in an event calculator, but is there a way to kind of speak to where we're at with that? And
We'll get to it later on. Okay, go ahead. What was your question? What specifically is the question?
I'd like to have an update on the event calculator and how the committee feels about moving forward with a consistent scoring tool. We talked about it last time. We've actually talked about it since, 2014, since I remember. I'm sure long before that.
Kristen, you want to take a stab at that, please?
Sure. Certainly, the
Can you talk up because it's hard to hear?
Sorry.
Thank you.
That better?
Yeah.
Okay. No, the economic impact calculator is certainly something that we need to be considering moving forward when evaluating these applications. I've been working on, with Joanne and Lisa and our team downstairs, an overall strategy of looking at all of these applications globally. So it's not just been about the scoring specifically, but, you know, one of the requests was for us to help be able and develop the strategy that's going to affect not just the transparency of process, but the accountability of our investments and the evaluation of the return on that investment. Part of that process is going to be using the economic impact calculator. So at this point right now, and it's not finished, it's still very much in process, with the idea being that we're going to be looking at this globally. It's not just taking pieces of this application, but rather an entire new funding application guidelines, all the different criteria, all these pieces have been worked on over the last 2.5 weeks. It will be ready for you to look at globally, my recommendation would be, rather than just scoring everything and making these decisions, but looking at it from a completely strategic objective, so that we're going to be looking at not just the heads and beds, but the marketing influence of that application. You're going to be looking at, does it make a difference? Is there a community give back? So there's all these different pieces. We talk a lot about heads and beds and what does that event do for us and how much is it worth? But the value of that, I was speaking with a few folks last week, is if you use an example like a Jeep invasion, for example, you know, that event takes place down in New Jersey, down in Myrtle Beach, and other places. Their demographic is one that we not necessarily have brought in years past. Their marketing may have an opportunity, if we were to give them money, we don't this year, but if we were hypothetically to give them a $10,000 investment to come back next year and maybe offset some of their costs, if they're marketing in, for example, the Mid-Atlantic or down south, and we in tourism department do not use those advertising dollars internally to market to those markets, that's a value-added in-kind piece that we need to incorporate and look at from a weighing and strategy standpoint, because that's dollars that are not going to be expended from our internal tourism. So it's looking at things in a much different light. So, you know, creating opportunities for co-branding and promotional partnerships. You know, does it support a local business? Are there partnerships that they're looking to work with hotels and businesses? So creating those collaborations. You know, so it's looking at, and I know I've kind of gone off tangent here, but my concern is that if we are to create a whole new scoring sheet today, how will that affect our evaluation criteria going forward if we're looking to change the process and really look at how this investment, which really, this is how we need to look at the occupancy tax. These are investments, these are sponsorships, but it's an investment into an event. It's an investment into an activity that will hopefully regenerate year after year. So it's cyclical. It's like creating, I made a graph, which I'll share, that really makes a lot of sense in looking at, you know, expenditures and, you know, profit versus nonprofit, things like that. So those are just my observations, just from a generic standpoint, but as we're looking to create an occupancy tax process that will benefit, you know, everyone and continue to keep growing, I think it's important to look at these pieces, not just individually, but as a whole, as a process, as a strategy. So moving forward, it grows and everybody wins, and the municipalities will end up getting more money, the events will get more money, and it just goes circular over and over and over.
May I just follow up regarding the scoring?
In a minute. Hold on. Yeah, our goal today is to get input from committee members or the public on any tweaks we need to make to these sheets. And then obviously we're going to go back to the tourism department, let them rework any comments or concerns. And then we'll come back with a final product either next month or the month after. This is not something we want to rush into because we really want to get it right. Go ahead, Chairwoman.
Thank you, Chairman Garrity. Kristen, I recognize that the tourism department's been working hard on this for years and years, and we've just had you come on board, and we're very grateful for that. I know the goal was hopefully this year to be looking at an updated occupancy tax application packet scoring sheet for both municipalities and for our event funding. My specific question to you, Kristen, is that, you know, I recognize how important the scoring sheet is. I would make the argument that it's probably the single most important document that we have that guides us with the law, and a law that desperately needed not only policy update, but we haven't followed it for years. And that's been a very uncomfortable position for many members on this board. So in terms of a time frame, I just wanted to get a good handle. To me, it seems like, I know we all have competing interests and things are busy. And I know the chairman of OCTAX and tourism is very busy. So my question is, what is a realistic time frame so that we can have some measurables between now and, you know, what's workable for you in tourism?
Well, right now I have a mostly completed first draft of the OCTAX grant funding application, rules, guidelines, appendices. There's probably about 5 to 7 other pieces that still need to be incorporated into it.
Okay.
I can probably have it done by next week, maybe a week after. It won't take that much longer. There's only a few pieces left that need to come in. Once that's done, it can go out for review as a whole packet. So it would include the guidelines, the evaluation, the criteria, the recommendations, a reformatted application, questions that we would want to ask specifically relating to, you know, the expected direct economic impact of an organization program on Warren County, prior success and managerial track records of the organization. These are all questions that we would want to ask on evaluation criteria. Completeness of the application. You know, are all the pieces there, as well as previous years' results on our reporting, impact of the organization on the image and the marketing of Warren County as a dynamic and unique destination, the degree of organization program that is supported by other community partners, what other sponsorships are supporting it, a full financial picture of the applicant, impact of the programs on the quality of life of the residents, the degree in which the program and organization draws diverse overnight visitors and the impact it would have on charitable partnerships potentials in the future. These are just some of the recommendations of possible evaluation criteria. There can be more incorporated, and that's where we would look to you for additional input to say, here's a rough draft, here's the beginning of something that you might want to consider based on what other best practices might be doing in and around the country and that sort of thing, and what is working to regenerate those funds. And ultimately, that's really our goal here, is to regenerate that fund so it comes back over and over and only gets larger.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, Supervisor Holman.
Thank you. And thank you, Joanne, and thank you, Kristen, for looking at this comprehensively and encouraging us to come, instead of just piecemeal this, to really look at it holistically. I really appreciate the effort. And I know it's been huge. I would, though, ask you to also incorporate a calendar
Yes.
of when applications are due, and incorporate into that calendar time periods for public input. in
And
this process.
that is part of the process in this it's actually on page 1. So,
Very good.
and the recommendation would be to perhaps do 2 rounds, a round 1 for applications that are shoulder season awards and a round 2 that are annual seasonal awards. So there's timeframes that they might want and need to know when their funding is going to be available.
I would also, though, like to urge this committee to think about OCTAX not only in terms of regenerating itself, but in terms of the powerful tool it could be for development.
Mhm.
And to that, I would like the committee to start considering how we might utilize the capital improvement plan in this greater picture with occupancy tax spending. If we're going to do away with the supplemental, that's fine. But we need to utilize some of that money for development in some of our smaller towns and for tourism related and supportive infrastructure. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead, Supervisor Moreno.
I like what I'm hearing, and I think you're doing a great job down here. One thing I think we all have to take in mind, and what we should really consider, there is a total plan done 20 years ago. That should be revamped. That should be, we should have a small group, sit down, revamp that whole program, because we have gotten away from it over the years. And come by the end of, say, November, and get back to having everybody have their wants and wishes in December, so that we can go forward in January and start giving out after going over the money, not wait, it's June already. I mean, I know I'm not blaming anybody here, it's just we've been trying to do this scoring sheet and it's really confusing.
Mhm.
But we got to really go back and look at the original. Amanda can give you a sheet of that. I know it's there. I don't have it with me, but, and read that and really modernize it, really cut it down a lot, because there's so many, well, I'll use the word things in the gray area. And you know, and having every different town and every different committee using it. So, I mean, I'm only giving you my 2 cents. I know I won't be around for January, but I think that should be done. And one of the things first should be done, just to look at that before you try to change all this stuff. You got to change what we were supposed to be doing, and honestly, might not have been following it all 20 years. So it's an old document. It should be brought to light again, and have a little small group and go over it and revamp it, because I know myself, there's a lot of things in there that says what we're not supposed to do, and we're still doing it. And, you know, so that's only my 2 cents. Thank you.
Any other comments? Supervisor Bramer.
Well, on that, I have another comment, but just to Supervisor Merlino's point, you know, there is that list of activities that some people undertake as using their OCTAX money, and I think that's something that we need to look at as well, that the so-called Appendix A. I think that if we're gonna go down this route and really revamp everything and look at it, we should, especially to Supervisor Hogan's point about wanting to make sure that we take a look at our capital infrastructure plan as a way to guide some of the spending of the money. So I just want to be clear then, I should not be looking at this anymore. We're going to trash this and you're revamping the whole thing.
We're going to completely, I would like to present to you for all of your review, a complete packet that includes everything. And to your point about the eligible and non-eligible appendix, that would also be included in this new package. So it is comprehensive. So when that applicant gets this package, there are no questions. This is what is allowed. This is what is not allowed. This is what is expected. We expect you to provide a full budget. We expect you to provide a full marketing plan. You know, this is how you can use our logo, and this is the way it should look. You know, brand standards, things like that. An economic impact visitor survey. So requiring folks to say, go ask your people who are coming to your event and let us know through those surveys, give them back to us. We'll give you the survey. It's easy. It's 10 questions, you know, but incorporating that so that we get that data and that information back rather than totally being solely reliant on the applicant who will turn around and may or may not say that they can provide that information. If you give them the form, then again, it's going back to that accountability and asking if we're going to provide you with funding and support, well, then there has to be a symbiotic relationship in return to get, you know, where everybody wins. You know, they get the funding, they get to run their event. We get the benefit of having a wonderful event in our area, but also by the same token, there's got to be that accountability for the funding support that we're going to provide. So it's things like that, you know, a marketing advertising form, plain and simple. All they got to do is fill it out. They can't say we can't provide you with one. If we give the one that literally you just fill it in. And so these are the kinds of pieces that I would like to see us incorporate into this structure so that we have a strategy. You have a strategy behind it that supports what the Occupancy Tax Fund was created for initially, which is to regenerate over and over and create a better support and funding structure for the county across the board for municipalities and events.
Can I follow up on that?
Sure.
I know this, thank you, Chairman. I know the scoring can get confusing, but to me, it's helpful as an objective way. So
Correct.
are we using a scoring or no?
There will be a new scoring evaluation criteria based on the new suggested evaluation criteria, what the things that you would want to look
The
at.
things that you talked about earlier, like community impact, marketing, reach,
Correct.
economic impact calculator, perhaps rolled into that. I mean, I think that can all be rolled into
Certainly.
a modified version of this thing.
Right.
Okay, all right,
And also things, for
Could we-
example, I'm sorry,
yeah.
you know, high impact visitors versus low impact visitors. You know, does it make sense? You know, are we going to put more weight on an event that's going to bring in, you know, 500 estimated room nights or more and 10,000 visitors versus a smaller one that's only going to bring in 100 plus room nights and maybe 2,500 day visitors and more. So using those as a weight and criteria also could be a great evaluation tool to say, what is the impact? You know, if it's day visitors, for a majority of the time, they may raise our sales tax income, but we're not going to see the bed tax income go up because they're just coming in for the day. So where does that weight fall and how does that make sense? So those are the critical things that we want to look at. Again, on that idea of regeneration.
Any other comments about the scoring sheet or things that you would like to see incorporate, Supervisor Wild?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Is the intent to use this as a guideline for the towns also?
For the towns?
Yes, is this guideline that we're going to be producing intended to be a guideline for the towns to apply their own OCTAX also?
You know, I can't answer that question because we have a sort of a home rule where all the towns have their own application and they all dole it out in different, a different way since I found out. I suppose, you know, we could have discussion, but I think I know from, just from my, experience, the town events that we fund bring people into our community, but they may not bring overnight guests into our community, except for the one being the garage sale. I got you. I'll see you. Okay. So I'm not sure, Mike, it would work for the town events 100%. Because, you know, you have a limited amount of money that the towns are given, and you have civic groups that usually it goes to civic groups. So I'm not sure they can meet all the criteria of expanded Warren County application, but we could certainly look at it and try to address it, you know, with a county application and a suggested town application. But I think there's home rule to that. And I'll ask Mr. Thomas, you've been here a long time, Mr. Molino. I mean, the towns are allowed to form their own application form and kind of dole it out the way they see fit. And Frank, is that correct, the way you understand it?
Yeah, I think each town does it whatever way they feel is appropriate. I mean, ours, for instance, really doesn't have an application other than applying to the town board.
Yeah.
And
That's the same thing with us, because you look at like Stony Creek and Thurman, Lake Luzerne, we have very few places for people to sleep, but we try to advertise to get people into the town. And while they're here, you know, they're spending maybe not OCTAX, but they're spending it in Lake George maybe, or Queensbury or Saratoga or wherever they're spending it, but they are spending sales tax revenue. And that's what we as small towns look for, to get a good share of the sales tax revenue.
Yeah, and the other thing we run into is when this was put in 2004, most of us weren't here. So you go in blind as a town supervisor, you go in blind not knowing how the whole thing was supposed to work. And then all of a sudden, you've got people coming to you on January 1st asking for oxy tax money that you're not going to receive until October. So that's happened. And then towns get behind with their applications or how to do it. And so I think the timing of the events and when the oxy tax money is distributed to the towns can create a little bit of problem. Some towns give the money out to certain organizations ahead of time, and then they give the oxy tax money that was allocated to each community. They give it out ahead of time, and then they get receipts afterwards. That can be cause problems. I think it should be a reimbursement the way the county does. The county gives out the oxy tax money. Well, will award a fund, but not pay out until the event meets the criteria and meets all the accounting functions that we require here. So you run into problems, Mike, when you don't have specific guidelines for the communities also. So I think it's a good idea, but I'm just not sure that the grand plan that is presented for the county will work with the community events. Andrea, Supervisor Hogan.
Thank you. To this discussion, I'd like to make 2 points. One is with the elimination of the supplemental spending plan, the impact on the overall impact on occupancy tax will be reduced vis-a-vis the town spending, right? Each individual town will have less to spend. So more money will be controlled by this process. As far as controlling the town's processes, I agree very much with all three of these supervisors in that you can't force a square peg into a round hole. What occupancy tax does for our communities is above and beyond putting heads in beds. It's community development and it's community engagement. For many of us, we seek advice from our community members on how this money should be spent, and it pulls people into the conversation. They feel like they have a piece of the say, and that's very important from a community development point of view. Those pieces, it helps us to create vital, vibrant communities, whether it's flowers on Main Street, sidewalks, events, whatever it is. You can't legislate too much on the local level without losing our ability to pull people in, create beautiful communities, and support the overall tourism of Warren County.
Supervisor Merlino.
100% agree with what you just said, but I'll give you one example in the town of Lake Luzerne. We give $5,000 to Snowmobile Club. And that Snowmobile Club brings in lots of money in the winter. It's one of the biggest other than the festivals, bringing people in, but they stay all over the county. They stay in Lake George and, all over. So we don't get the credit for what we do the club is in our town, and I try to keep them solvent because it's tough to let them, and I don't disagree with you, Mr. Chairman, but to have them put up front monies to spend before we give it to them. Some of these organizations like chambers, like historical societies, these are people that I give money to do events to bring people from Lake George, from Saratoga, from into town of Lake Luzerne to see our history. We have a docent program that monitors our tourism center, our one-room schoolhouse, our pulp mill, and these are people just sit there and mostly volunteers or get $20 for 4 hours to keep those places open. So that's money that it's hard to calculate it getting back or giving out. Let them do it first, and then we'll pay them for their efforts. But so it's a total different animal between county. Because county's talking thousands and thousands and thousands. A lot of us give out 2,000 here, 1,000 here, 3,000 here, and these all one group make the town of Lake Luzerne get people into it. That's just, again, another 2 cents.
Supervisor Thomas had a comment.
Yes, I fully agree with Supervisor Molino and Supervisor Hogan. For example, another example is the lumberjack competition. The Stony Creek Chamber of Commerce puts on the Mountain Days Festival, but there is no way that they could upfront the money to pay the lumberjacks to have that competition. So without upfronting the money, that event would not happen. So it's and the money is accounted for because I keep track of it, make sure that the receipts match up with what was spent. But otherwise it wouldn't work. And plus the development is exactly right because at the time in 2003 and into 2004, there was a considerable amount of discussion on that Appendix A. And one of the major points was the capital improvements or the capital projects. There was a lot of discussion at the time about that. And it's an important feature of the whole thing for the towns.
Supervisor Bramer.
Thank you. Just on the discussion of the money to the towns, I know that we gave the allocation to Horicon and we never addressed Johnsburg. So I wanted to make sure that we did that today and got a resolution through for Johnsburg.
Yeah, they'll be on our agenda at the end. We got to add on. Supervisor or Chairwoman Seaver.
Thank you, Chairman Garrity. To Supervisor Thomas's point, and I think it's a valid one, but I do want to revisit this. The Appendix A spending guidelines has never been passed by this legislative body. It was a recommendation developed by a county administrator for municipalities. Our county attorney weighed in on that last year and was specific with the fact that it was meant to be a guide for towns to use. It was not necessarily supposed to be a document that we provided as a, this is what you must do. Obviously, to Supervisor Garrity's point, each town is adopting the rules and regs around the law that fits best for their municipality. So I would ask that we, I don't know if we need a resolution, but that we dissolve that Schedule A. And as, because by the way, there's two Schedule A's. There's a scoring guideline, and then there is the list of approved expenses for municipalities. And have Kristen work on a best practices with those that are town supervisors for guidelines to the towns that might be helpful. But as it relates to county funding events, we should be providing to our county events a list of approved expenses. That's something that we do regulate from the county perspective on anyone coming and asking for county dollars for tourism generated events, which is different than a municipality. To Supervisor Hogan's application, which you'll be talking about shortly, or to Supervisor Smith's in Horicon. Those are different needs than what we're looking at event-wise, county-wide. So I would just ask that we are very careful with that scoring, with that application of the spending guidelines, because we didn't pass it. It's not part of our packet. And we hold that around like it's the end all. And if it's on this list, you can use it. But that's really up for the municipalities to develop their own guides on that in accordance to the law, and they're 25%.
Thank you. Any
Is that
other-
on the agenda, Supervisor Garrity?
What's that?
Are we going to review that in a future time, the best
Well, I think-
practices for municipalities? That's Schedule A?
I do believe when we get the suggested moving on with the application and the form for Warren County, we could certainly bring it up in the future. I'll write it as a pending item that we can look at, Appendix A. But to that point, you know, something was better than nothing. And so we have Appendix A. I think we've all tried to adhere to it, whether it's technically been adopted by the board or not. That's a technicality. I think most of the communities use it, look at it. And then if in the past, if you've had a question, you always brought it to the county attorney. But yeah, we'll get on the pending items, and we'll keep track of it. I'll ask Joanne to just keep that in mind, and Kristen, when we go forward, when we discuss spending for the towns. So Supervisor Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a quick suggestion. Could we incorporate into our OCTAX calendar an annual training for municipalities?
Anybody else? I see you.
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I brought up in the past and really just seeing accountability for the municipalities of how they've spent their OCTAX, but I'm pleased to say, but I didn't know about the lumberjack thing up in Stony Creek, which I think is a great thing. And I'm wondering if we had that list of what everybody's spending their OCTAX on, that maybe tourism and that, and we all, could all get together and help maybe even expand that, from your towns and others to draw in. It might be a helpful thing getting the list from the towns, so we could kind of review it and pull in a whole package and see how it can become, because there's no I in we. So this is what we do in Warren County, and we rely on tourism. So the bigger we can pull everything in and put it together as a package, the greater we all can benefit from it.
I just will answer that. I know where I sit. I use Warren County, and I believe most of our events in our town already use Warren County Tourism. We piggyback with Warren County Tourism, asked for their help with developing a advertising strategy. They've been very helpful. Our one event's been going on for 56 years. And I've worked hand in glove with Warren County Tourism, and we've made so many improvements by doing that, Brad. I think as far as the reports go, they always were getting filed in the county attorney's office. There was a review done. We looked at most of them this year. We have them all up to date. The balances are all up to date. Yeah, there's so many community events. There's tons of community events. And you're going to have a couple coming up in the fall, one in the fall in Thurman that attracts a lot of people. And the second one will be Maple Days over in Thurman, which is a regional event as far as I'm concerned. It brings in a lot of people, and they've never come to the county asking for Oxy tax money. But I do think, you know, our tourism department works closely with all these events. But that's a good idea. We'll have to try to get a master calendar going sometime. There would be a lot on it, and there'd be a lot of events on it. So.
I'm just thinking it'll be to work out, but you also said, now, where can, if you're interested in viewing the financials and that from the town, where can we, you know, I've asked for a copy of it in the past. Do I?
I'll go to the county attorney's office. They are the holders of the events and reports.
We can't get a report made up and handed to tourism committee, so
Well, they already have it. The committee's seen the balances. If you want a copy of it, it's a one page.
Okay.
Is that what you want, or you want detail, or you want one?
I was just looking at details. I'm just trying to be
Well,
more
I would go
familiar
with-
wise with what goes on throughout the whole county.
You want the details of every town, I would go to the county attorney's office and ask them to make copies of all the reports.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Somebody else had their hand up. Joanne or Jean? Oh, Jean, sorry.
I know I always got my big mouth going, and I don't want to get anybody mad at me, but now we have a discussion here about some financing for towns through OCTAX. And because of the spending plan. Now, back, and the ones that have been around here a while, have been fighting for 5, 6, 7, 8 years to reevaluate how towns get their sales tax. And of course, that always got rebutted by the towns that got a lot. But they came in with the spending plan, and that spending plan was supposed to come out of sales tax money, not our tax money. So if we're moving in a different direction now to fund towns for special events out of our tax, my opinion, that should have come out of sales tax revenue if you don't do that spending plan.
Okay.
So you understand what I'm saying? It's something different. We're changing now. Not that I have anything against these towns looking for money, but that thing was the spending plan that was put together to give towns more extra money. And now that we delayed it last year because of the virus, I don't know if this is the right place for it to come back to.
Yeah, well, that's not part of the law either. The spending plan was never part of the law. If we're going to stick to what's part of the law, that spending plan was never part of the law. So I know Supervisor Wild, you had your hand up, and Supervisor Thomas. So go ahead, Supervisor Wild.
Chairman Garrity, thank you. Just two thoughts. On the applications, I didn't see it on one of the applications I looked at, but I'd like to see previous support that would come from towns or maybe the state to see where else they're getting support from. And I'd like to have that from the last number of years. So if the town of Johnsburg, just use an example, were to give an event money that the county also gave money to, we'd like to know about that as we look at awards going further. And that I also think from a scoring standpoint, we want to think about maybe detracting some points because they're getting the funding from the county, but they're also getting funding from the towns. I think we may want to take a look at that and think about whether that makes an impact as money is tight, where the money should go, because there's always more applications than what we have to be able to support.
You're correct, but I do know that Lisa does audit the reports to make sure that the monies from the towns don't get used, does not get used on the same things that the county would allocate for an event. I know, and I just got to speak from our experience at garage sale. You know, most of that money comes from Warren County, but any supplemental money they may come to the town to ask me to offset one or two expense from the Chamber of Commerce. They're not for profit. They don't have a lot of funds. And I know that we compare notes, and I think most towns do compare notes with the tourism department on these bigger events if they come. And I believe Lake George worked closely with the events to separate what comes from the towns and what comes from the county, but it's good point. Supervisor Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hate to disagree with my friend from Luzerne. However, but my recollection of the supplemental money was the reason that was started to be handed out was because the fund balance of the occupancy tax was getting too large. And basically the money needed to be spent, needed to be out there doing things, but I don't recollect that it had anything to do with sales tax.
Anybody else on this discussion? Okay, we have about 17 minutes left. Joanne?
Just to Supervisor McGowan's point in coordinating with the towns on smaller events, we do have a very comprehensive content calendar, and that is exactly what Casey does every day. So I would invite you to follow our social media. We have a considerable Facebook following, and we do put dollars behind. We have a tiered system of events, our signature events, tier 1, tier 2, and some smaller things that we would just promote organically. But our social media is very rich in supporting our smaller communities, but all of our events around the county.
Thank you.
Anybody else? How about Supervisor Stroud? Have you waved up there yet?
He's in another meeting.
No, he's there. Nothing? Well, he was there.
No, he left for another meeting.
Okay, Supervisor Bringer.
I wanted to get back to the Johnsburg request.
Okay.
And also kind of corollary to that is how much we've already allocated from the fund that we have.
Can't answer that. I'll ask. Do we have the update, Lisa?
We have a resolution going through right now for 115,390 to add to the balance of 285.
Or the county administrator, we have the money. We have.
So the budget amendment that we did at the previous committee meeting amended the 2021 budget to account for the 2020 profit, if you will. Not really a profit. We just did, we did better than we thought. We banked about $300,000. So we amended the budget to put that in. Portion of it went to fulfill our 25% distribution to the towns, which is based off of average actual revenue from last year, not average revenue. I said the wrong word, actual revenue from last year. And the remainder of it went into funds. And then the committee subsequently earmarked all of those funds to applications that were already in front of us. So in terms of the money that the appropriations that we are putting into the budget at the next board meeting, all of those are earmarked. But again, we only did a budget amendment for 2020's performance. We haven't addressed yet 2021's performance. 2021 budget is budgeted for $4.33 million in revenue. We're going to do better than that. So we have additional room this year to amend the budget to increase appropriations for additional events, applications that come to us, and additional applications that might come to us from municipalities.
So, any other questions? Yes. Super.
Do you have a recommendation, Mr. Moore, about the amount that we could increase that budget?
I'll get in trouble.
Anticipated revenue?
I may get in trouble with the treasurer's office, but if you can do a back of the envelope thing. If you want to be super conservative, and so last year, let me give you the exact numbers. It's in my table here. Last year's revenue was $4,238,439. 2019 revenue was $4,864,332. If we said, oh, let's assume that we hit the median there, the median is $4.5 million. Got to unhide my rows here. Whoops.
200 some thousand.
Yeah, unhide. So, if you take the median of those two numbers, which is, we'll absolutely do that. That's being very conservative. That's 4.55 million. So 4.55 million is $220,000 more than what's budgeted for revenue for this year. So yeah, in my mind, it'd be very easy to do a budget amendment of, say, $250,000. And I think we'll end up doing better than that. But that's, it's not my call. It's whether the board's comfortable with that and whether the people that manage our finances are comfortable with that.
Well, Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to amend the budget for 200,000, being a little bit extra conservative, which will give us some money to allocate for the rest of this year. And we can always increase it further if we do better than 4.5 million.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'm not in favor of doing it right now. I just don't think we have enough information. I know we have a couple events coming down the line in the future. I don't know why we need to do this today without getting through our budget amendment and talking with the treasurer's office. I just think it's not the right thing to do right now. That's my opinion. Go ahead, Supervisor.
Thank you. My opinion is that we've already allocated all the money and we still have applications pending. We have projections of probably 4.8 million, and we've only budgeted 4.3. So that's actually 500,000 in revenue that will still be coming to us. And I'm not going to leave Johnsburg hanging when they've been asking for months. And I wanted to make sure that Supervisor Hogan was here, and now we're telling her that she can't have her 15,000. I mean,
Nobody said that.
we don't have the money to allocate to her. So why would we do that?
I thought we did a budget.
And can I finish, please?
Sure.
And we still have some additional revenue that I believe will be coming. I mean, I have to believe that will be coming through the American Rescue Plan as far as recovery of lost revenue and occupancy tax funds from last year. So I think 200,000 as a budget amendment is very conservative and appropriate to go forward with at this time so that we can make allocations off of money that we think exists in our budget, not off of thin air.
So how much did what was their amendment that we just did?
We amended the budget last committee meeting for 300,000 that in recognition of 2020.
And is that more money than we have allocated in our events?
Yeah, no, it's slightly less. So the amount that bumped up the special events line, the committee then appropriated all of that and an additional like a couple of $100.
Mr. Chairman.
Any other discussion? Supervisor Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree wholeheartedly with Supervisor Bramer. I never like to allocate money that isn't in the budget, but I'd like to make it about a little bit more than Johnsburg. If we actually will have this money, we need to get it out and working for us. The whole conversation today has been about how do we increase our OC tax? Well, we increase it by putting it to work. And if we don't allocate it, it can't go to work.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is this discussion on this?
Yeah, just some clarification there, because I get confused, and I got a lot of phone calls after the last meeting with some of the questions I answered are really more simple questions, really for the average person. I just sat here, but so if I may just get some clarifications for myself, so an understanding, if that's all right, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
All right, thank you. I like all the figures that come out. We talk about the 4.3 million, the 4.8 million. All right, those are just big numbers being thrown out there. And really, but the bottom line understanding is right now, we had a $285,000 budget. We added $115,900, which brings us basically to $401,000. $400,900. All right. So $100. All right. We have 285. Claudia asked for 200 more, which would bring us up to 285. So right now, we're standing, and I brought this up before, at $400,900 of what we've already allocated. And we're not done. We still have to talk about Johnsburg and everything else. We talk about these big numbers and all this money and all this projection coming in. I really just want the bottom line. How much money can we put in there safely and conservatively? All right. So we could boast up our numbers up to at least $500,000. So we have the funds in there. If we have all these projections coming in, I don't need the big numbers. I want just the bottom line is what can we comfortably work with so we could finish out these applications and get this, get this money working for us.
Who wants to take a stab at that? How much? 100,000?
What's that? What's the 100,000?
To add into the budget amendment for 100,000.
So we're already at 400. We're approved for $400,900,
So
correct?
another 100,000.
And another 100,000. All right. You wanted 200,000?
Yes, Your Honor.
I'm just confused. So that would put us up at 600,000 instead of 500,000. But right now we're at 400,000 and we still have to do, some more applications. You don't think 100,000 more is applicable to keep us moving forward? I'm just trying to be simple here. I'm just too many big numbers.
It's committee's will, Supervisor Wild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've only been on the tourism committee this year, but I've experienced it the 3+ years I've been here. And my sense is that when there's money left over, it gets spent. And one of the things that I've always talked about, and our staff has talked about it today, it's an investment. And we're often doing just short-term investment type things, an event this year. Maybe the event will come back again next year. But I'd like to see some strategy put in terms of what we do with these funds and break it down into events and investments. And investments could consider new events. But investments could also consider saving some money for a larger investment. I know Supervisor Strauss talked about a structure in Wood Park. That's an idea. I'm sure there's many other ideas, but I'd like to see some money put away for a larger term investment and based on our strategy. So I'm not going to support this today because we'll just spend it on something else.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second to transfer another $200,000 into Oxy tax special, just the event fund.
I think that was the
Event code.
motion. Yes.
Okay, you got a motion and a second. Let's take a vote. All those favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Opposed. It passes.
Could I have a roll call, please?
Sure,
Oh, you called it passed.
it passed.
Okay, thank you. Never mind.
It did pass?
We can do roll calls.
Can I see a roll call?
Okay, real quick, we've got the Johnsburg application. Go ahead. Do you want to explain it, Andrea?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, can we have a roll call for that? Because I couldn't tell by just the voice.
Sure. I'm doing it like they do in the Senate. Go ahead.
Mr. Garrity,
No.
Mr. Merlino,
No.
Ms. Bramer,
Yes.
Mr. Wild,
No.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Mr. Beatty,
Yes.
Mr. Stroud. I don't think he's back there. They've got one.
Sorry.
You've got 3 no's and 3 yeses, so the motion fails. You've got 3 no's and 3 yeses, so it fails.
Fails.
Sorry, guys.
Okay,
I'll bring it up at finance.
all right. Johnsburg, you want to explain the application, please?
I'll explain the application, but I feel like a little bit of a hypocrite. I really don't want to allocate money that isn't in the budget. So let me explain the application, but I'm going to ask you all to just hang on to that thought and ask you not to call a vote on it. Is that acceptable, Mr. Chairman?
Sure. Yeah, I can just about hear you, so
Oh, sorry.
that's,
The town of Johnsburg developed a marketing plan in 2018. We hired a consultant and we moved forward with the implementation of a marketing website. We've worked closely with the county and we continue to work closely with the county. There's a lot of pointing at each other from our website and the county's website, and it's been a strong marketing tool for us. But with the loss of the supplemental money, it gutted the money that we would have normally put into the maintenance of that website and social media presence. So I'm asking for $15,000. I'm asking for a commitment over 5 years so that we can do our long-range planning and keep our website going, which promotes Northern Warren County. We do primarily promote our own businesses and our own events off the website, but we coordinate with North Warren Chamber. And one of the reasons the town has to do this is because we do not have our own chamber. Many of the towns do. They're struggling to keep them going. Unfortunately, ours folded in 2019. So this is how we do that instead of having a chamber. Does anybody have any questions for me? We also support this website maintenance and the social media presence through general fund and OCTAX that comes out of the town's allocation as well.
So you don't want to act on this today until we get a budget amendment?
To be honest with you, I would love this commitment, but I'm not going to be that hypocrite.
Okay. Any other, Joanne, please?
I would say that each of the individual towns does a very good job at promoting their individual municipalities, and we as a county tourism department absolutely all the time support through website and social media. But I do see that we cannot be the be-all and the end-all to Johnsburg or Lake George or the Tri-Lakes area. And there are many different, there could be a Chamber of Commerce, there could be a town, there could be Tri-Lakes, which is a business alliance. So not everyone is set up quite the same and requests funding in the same way. So I do think that's part of the bigger discussion that we as the committee need to consider is how to fund. And this is another part of an infrastructure decision as we're talking about all of the funding allocations moving forward, part of the big picture.
Okay. Any other comments? Supervisor Bramer.
I'd like to know if this committee will move the 100,000 that was suggested by Lisa, because this is ridiculous.
Are you making that in a form of motion?
I'm asking the committee for their input.
You have to address me. Will the committee answer that? Does the committee does somebody want to make a motion to do a budget transfer of $100,000? Chairwoman?
I just have a brief discussion on it. And I would ask our county administrator to talk about what our occupancy tax looks like, even as we're talking about the stimulus funding and the guidelines that are going to be developed here and finalized in a few weeks. If you're not going to do a budget amendment for the 100,000, I would ask this committee to at least consider the request by Supervisor Hogan to support her municipality, which is something we hear quite often from the towns in this board. We just supported Sylvia Smith, Supervisor Smith in Horicon and her request. And I think it's appropriate, given all the work that Supervisor Hogan has put into this, that someone make a motion to support the minimum request that she's asking for, which she has proved to be of value to her community and to the county overall, and meets a need that we aren't currently meeting for her, that hopefully by the end of this year, we can meet for all of our municipalities.
Thank you. Supervisor Thomas.
I would second that. I get a little upset when I sit here and I see that the occupancy tax committee won't support the towns, and won't do things for the towns and fully fund what their request. As long as their request is not off the wall and something ridiculous, that should be one of our priorities in my opinion, because it's the towns that get these things going, and I agree completely.
Supervisor Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry to occupy so much of your time, but let me elaborate a little bit. It might be a little bit short-sighted to not fund the town's requests. We have 7 rafting companies who bring in about 25,000 people to Warren County. Most of those people stay overnight. We have Revolution Rail operating. They bring in 40,000 people. Most of those people stay overnight. We have hiking and biking, which we know right now is what people want to be doing. We have Gore Mountain. They do their own marketing, but what we do with our website is we point to Gore, Gore points to us, we point to the county. the county points to us. It's an important piece of the whole puzzle. I ask you to consider an amendment of at least, I guess, 15,000 to fund our request. However, we do have other requests coming down the pike. And one of the big ones is ice castles. We're going to have to commit to that before 2022. I'd like to see us be a little bit forward thinking in this request, and 100,000 would be the bare minimum. So please, folks, this is not about you and me. This is about the county and how we do it best.
And the reason why, can I speak? The reason why I wouldn't go forward with the budget amendment is for that very reason. We know we're going to get more applications coming down the pike. We're going to have to do another budget amendment, but I would like to see one more budget amendment with the proper amount, not saying we believe 200,000. It may be 250,000 because we do know we got ice castles and there are going to be some more applications coming in. The reason why I didn't want to do 200 at this time was because I think in the future, we're going to, I just don't like, I would like to get it under one budget amendment to an amount that we are pretty sure we're going to get. And that was the reason why I didn't want to see a 200,000 because we're picking a number. Okay, we think 200,000. It could be 250, it may be 300,000. But, and, you know, I'm not opposed for supporting events. That was, you're taking it wrong. What I don't want to do is do a budget amendment for 200,000, come back a month and a half later and do one for 55,000. We should come set on a number where we think we're going to get and do one budget amendment. But I'll make the motion to do $100,000 and then hopefully by next month, we can get to a bigger number if that's what the committee wants to do. I'll make a motion to transfer $100,000 so we can fund these events, the event that we have on the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second it.
We have a second. We have a discussion by Supervisor Wild.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. You know, I'm all for funding the towns for special events, for special projects. While at the same time, I believe we need to have some budget guidelines for what we do with OCTAX as a whole. So what percentage of our OCTAX goes towards towns?
25%.
I understand that. 25% goes, but now the towns are coming to the county asking for more. So what budget do we have in the county dispersible funds that are reserved for the towns? Special requests.
We don't.
We don't
Don't have to-
separate that. And I think going forward, you need to have some kind of guidelines for us because it seems like we have a request in January. We have a request in March. We have a request in July, in September. And we lose the big picture in terms of where we're going. And I truly would like to see some budget to say, this is what we're going to do for the towns, including Glens Falls and including everything. You know, what are we planning out of this 75% of the OCTAX that goes to these special projects?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I think if I do, I'll take a crack at that. I think when we had the spending plan, that would have been the answer to the question, that we had the 25% distribution and then the additional spending plan that was part of the adopted budget. We adopted, for instance, in 2020, we adopted $1,221,500 as the 25% distribution and an additional $405,000 as a spending plan. So that's a total of $1.6 million out of an expense budget of $5.6 million is what we adopted for 2020. Due to what happened in 2020 and we, you know, we knocked the spending plan down as part of the deficit reduction program. And then in the 2021 budget, we didn't budget for it, not knowing how 2020 was going to end and how 2021 was going to look. So that question may have been more easily answered in normal times, but since we've been looking at the spending plan differently, it's not as easy to understand. And that's what we're grappling with, is we have a 2021 that's going to perform better than what was budgeted, so that we know we will be able to add to this budget. And we have several different areas that are in need of that money. We have towns that are coming to us with requests. We have potentially other special events like ice castles that are coming to us with requests. So that's why the answer is a little bit foggy right now.
But we have a motion, we have a second. Can we vote on the motion to transfer $100,000. All those in favor, raise your hands if you're in favor of voting for it. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed, raise your hand. One. That motion passes. Would you like it to recap it, or are you okay?
I'm good.
Okay. I know we're running late. I don't want to cut in anybody else's time. Now let's vote on the Johnsburg application.
I'll make that motion.
Motion to vote on the full 3 years or 1 year.
The
You want
ask
to
was
vote
five.
on the application the way it is, or,
Sorry, the ask was 5.
oh, 5 years? Oh, mine says, okay. Is that your motion?
For 5 years, sure. Yes.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second it on the question.
Second by Supervisor Merlino.
Can we
Discussion.
just do it for 1 year now and reinvent it at the end of this year into next year so that we have more of an idea what's going on? Instead of committing to 5 years?
Yes, if Supervisor Bramer is willing to amend her. Or Supervisor Garrity, was it your motion?
I
No,
made the
it's
motion. I made the motion, and that's fine. 1 year.
1 year. We have a motion, and Supervisor Molina, will you amend your Okay, we have a motion and second. Any other discussion? 1 year. All those in favor, raise your hands by say aye.
Uh,
Raise your hand. Anybody opposed? Motion passed. Nothing else come from the committee. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Supervisor Hogan, a second by Supervisor Well. We are adjourned. Sorry about that.